When detectives forced their way into that second-floor apartment in downtown Portland, the smell hit them first. Death. Unmistakable. They found her in the bathtub, 22 stab wounds across her body, her phone sitting on the sink, still unlocked, still logged into an account her husband had discovered just 8 days earlier. An Onlyfans page with thousands of followers, and for the past week he'd been the one posting, pretending to be her, responding to her friends, making everyone believe she was still alive. But Emily Rodriguez had been dead the entire time, murdered by the man who promised to love her forever. This is the story of jealousy, control, and how a secret turned into a death sentence. Before we dive deep into this story, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Emily Rodriguez was 26 years old when she died. She worked as a tattoo artist at a shop called Ink Soul on the east side of Portland. Creative, outgoing, the kind of person who made friends everywhere she went. Her Instagram was filled with photos of her artwork, selfies with clients, nights out with friends. To anyone looking at her life from the outside, Emily had it all figured out. But nobody knew what was happening behind closed doors. Nobody knew about the financial pressure she was under. Nobody knew about the controlling relationship she was trapped in. And nobody knew about the secret she'd been keeping for 4 months. A secret that would cost her everything. She'd met Brandon Hayes 2.5 years earlier at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was 24 then, working as a freelance videographer, tall and handsome with an edge that Emily found attractive. He was intense, focused, the kind of guy who looked at you like you were the only person in the room. At first, Emily thought that intensity was romantic. She didn't realize it was obsession. They started dating within weeks, moved in together after 8 months, got married in a small courthouse ceremony a year later with just a handful of people present. Emily's best friend Rachel was there. She remembers thinking something felt off about the way Brandon looked at Emily during the vows. Not with love exactly. More like ownership. Like Emily was something he'd won, something he needed to protect from the world. But Rachel didn't say anything. Didn't want to ruin Emily's happiness. Looking back now, she wishes she had. Life in their apartment seemed normal enough from the outside. They posted couple photos on social media, went to parties together, celebrated anniversaries. But inside those walls things were different. Brandon was controlling in ways that crept up slowly. At first it was small things, asking where Emily was going, who she was with, what time she'd be home. Then it escalated. He'd check her phone when she was asleep, go through her messages, her emails, her social media DMs. If she came home late from work, he'd interrogate her. Who were you talking to? Why didn't you answer my calls? Why are you dressed like that? Emily's friends started noticing changes in her. She'd cancel plans last minute, stop responding to group chats, show up to gatherings looking tired, stressed, like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. When they'd ask if everything was okay, she'd smile and say she was just busy, just tired, just dealing with life. But they knew. They knew something was wrong. They just didn't know how wrong it really was. 6 months before her death, Emily and Brandon hit a financial crisis. Brandon had lost several clients. His videography business wasn't bringing in enough money. The rent was due. Bills were piling up. Credit cards were maxed out. They were barely scraping by. Emily was working full-time at the tattoo shop, but her income alone wasn't enough to cover everything. They needed more money, fast. One night, while scrolling through social media, Emily came across a post from another tattoo artist she followed, a girl around her age talking about how she'd made $5,000 in 1 month on Onlyfans. $5,000. That was more than Emily made in 2 months at the shop. She clicked on the profile, read through the comments, saw other women sharing their success stories, how they'd paid off debt, bought cars, gained financial independence. Emily sat there staring at her phone, thinking, could she do that? Could she really put herself out there like that? Post photos for strangers? Let people pay to see her? The idea made her uncomfortable, but so did the stack of overdue bills on the kitchen counter. She didn't tell Brandon, didn't even mention it. She knew exactly how he'd react. He was already jealous when other guys looked at her in public, already made comments about what she wore, already accused her of wanting attention from other men. If she told him she was thinking about starting an Onlyfans, he'd lose his mind. So she kept it to herself. Created the account late one night when Brandon was out with friends, used a different name, different email, kept it completely separate from her regular social media. At first, she posted conservative content, artistic photos, lingerie shots, nothing explicit, just enough to test the waters. The money started coming in within days, $20 here, $50 there, tips from subscribers, requests for private content. Within 2 weeks, she'd made $800. Within a month, $3,000. It was more money than she'd ever made that quickly in her life. She opened a separate bank account Brandon didn't know about, deposited the cash there. When he asked how they suddenly had extra money, she told him she'd picked up more clients at the tattoo shop, told him business was booming. He seemed satisfied with that answer, didn't question it further, maybe because he wanted to believe her, or maybe because he was too wrapped up in his own struggles to notice the holes in her story. But secrets don't stay hidden forever, especially not in a relationship where one person is constantly looking for reasons to be suspicious. The arguments between Emily and Brandon started getting worse around month 3 of her OnlyFans career. He'd accuse her of being distant, of spending too much time on her phone, of hiding something from him. She'd deny it, of course. But the guilt was eating away at her. She knew what she was doing wasn't technically wrong. She was making money to help their household, to keep them afloat. But she also knew Brandon would never see it that way. To him, it would be betrayal, humiliation, proof that she didn't respect him or their marriage. So she kept lying, kept hiding, kept hoping he'd never find out. But hope isn't a strategy, and the truth has a way of surfacing at the worst possible moment. It happened on a Tuesday night in late July. Brandon was home alone trying to troubleshoot their internet connection. It had been slow all day, and he needed to upload a project for a client. Emily's laptop was sitting on the coffee table. She'd left it open, password saved, everything accessible. He wasn't trying to snoop. At least that's what he told himself. He just needed to check the Wi-Fi settings, see if maybe she'd changed something without telling him. But when he opened the browser, he saw the tabs, multiple tabs, all OnlyFans, her profile, her photos, her messages, her earnings, everything. Brandon sat there frozen, staring at the screen. His hands started shaking, his chest tightened. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be his wife, the woman he'd married, the woman who belonged to him. But it was, and the betrayal felt like a physical blow. He scrolled through her page, saw the photos she'd posted, the comments from strangers, men telling her she was beautiful, sexy, perfect, asking for more, paying her for private content, treating her like she was theirs to consume. Brandon's vision blurred with rage. How long had this been going on? How many men had seen her like this? How many people knew about this while he'd been walking around like a fool? When Emily came home that evening, she knew immediately something was wrong. The apartment was dark. Brandon was sitting on the couch in silence, her laptop open in front of him, her OnlyFans page displayed on the screen. She froze in the doorway. Her stomach dropped. Her heart started racing. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Brandon looked up at her slowly. His face was expressionless, but his eyes were cold, dead. He didn't yell, didn't scream, just asked in a quiet, controlled voice, "How long?" Emily didn't know what to say, didn't know how to explain. 4 months, she finally whispered. 4 months, Brandon repeated. 4 months you've been doing this behind my back. 4 months you've been letting other men see you. 4 months you've been lying to me. Emily tried to explain, tried to tell him it was just for money, that they needed it, that she was going to tell him eventually, that it didn't mean anything. But Brandon wasn't listening. He stood up, walked toward her, his fists clenched at his sides. "You made me look like an idiot," he said. Everyone probably knows. Everyone probably thinks I'm some pathetic husband who can't even satisfy his own wife." Emily shook her head. "Nobody knows. I didn't tell anyone. I kept it completely separate." Brandon laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. "You think that matters? You think the fact that strangers are jerking off to photos of my wife doesn't matter as long as our friends don't know?" The argument escalated quickly. Brandon started yelling, calling her names: whore, slut, liar. Emily tried to defend herself, tried to make him understand, but there was no understanding, no forgiveness, no path forward. Brandon told her to get out, to leave, that he couldn't even look at her. Emily grabbed her keys and ran, drove to her friend Rachel's apartment across town. She showed up crying, shaking, barely able to get the words out. Rachel let her in, made her tea, let her talk. Emily told her everything, about the Onlyfans, about Brandon finding out, about the things he'd said. Rachel's response was immediate. "Don't go back. This is dangerous. Men like Brandon don't just get over things like this. They obsess. They retaliate. You need to stay away from him." But Emily didn't want to believe her husband was dangerous. She wanted to believe they could work through this. That given time, Brandon would calm down, would understand why she did it, would forgive her. So the next morning when Brandon called, apologizing, saying he'd overreacted, Emily wanted to believe him, wanted to believe they could fix their marriage. She went back home. For the next 3 weeks, things seemed almost normal on the surface. Brandon was quiet, withdrawn, but he wasn't yelling anymore, wasn't calling her names. Emily had deleted her Onlyfans account completely, closed everything down, transferred the money to their joint account. Thought that would prove to Brandon that she was serious about their marriage, that she was done with all of it. But Brandon was still obsessing, still thinking about it every second of every day. Late at night when Emily was asleep, he'd go through her phone, check her email, her social media, her texts, looking for evidence that she was still doing it, still lying to him, still betraying him. He found old photos she hadn't deleted, screenshots of messages from subscribers, proof that she'd been planning this longer than she'd admitted. The jealousy consumed him, made him paranoid, made him dangerous. He started searching online, reading forums where men talked about their partners doing Onlyfans, how to track them, how to control them, how to stop them. He read one comment that stuck with him: "If she won't stop, make her stop." He didn't write it, but he thought about it. Every single day. August 10th was the night everything ended. Emily had spent the afternoon with Rachel. They'd gone shopping, grabbed lunch, talked about everything except Brandon. When Emily got home around 6 in the evening, Brandon was in the kitchen, cooking dinner, acting completely normal. Emily thought maybe they were finally moving past it. Maybe things were going to be okay after all. They ate together, watched a movie, went to bed, but Brandon couldn't sleep. He lay there next to her, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, thinking about the photos, the messages, the strangers, the humiliation. Around midnight, he got up, walked to the kitchen, came back with a knife from the block on the counter. Emily was lying on her side, her back to him, breathing steadily in sleep. She didn't hear him come in, didn't know what was about to happen. The first stab was to her upper back. She woke up screaming, tried to turn around, tried to see what was happening, tried to fight him off. But Brandon was stronger, faster, fueled by rage he'd been holding in for weeks. He kept stabbing, over and over, 22 times in total. Her head, her neck, her chest, her arms. She tried to crawl away from him, tried to reach the bedroom door, but she didn't make it. She died there on the bedroom floor, in the apartment they'd shared, in the life they'd built together, blood pooling beneath her. Brandon stood over her body, not crying, not panicking, just staring, processing what he'd done. Then he dragged her to the bathroom, lifted her into the tub, cleaned up the blood as best he could, took her phone, and started pretending to be her. For the next 7 days, Brandon ran Emily's social media accounts, posted old photos from her camera roll, responded to messages from her friends, made it look like she was still alive, still fine, still going about her normal life. Rachel texted multiple times, "Hey girl, haven't seen you since Tuesday. Everything okay with Brandon?" Brandon, pretending to be Emily, would respond, "Yeah, everything's good. Just been busy with work." When Rachel suggested meeting up for coffee, Brandon would make excuses. Emily's feeling sick. Emily's visiting family out of state. Emily's swamped with appointments at the shop. But Rachel knew something was off. The texts didn't sound like Emily. They were too short, too cold, too vague. Emily always used emojis, always asked questions, always wanted to make plans. These responses felt robotic, distant, wrong. On the 7th day, Rachel decided she'd had enough. She drove to Emily and Brandon's apartment, knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. She called Brandon's phone. It rang and rang. No answer. She called the police, told them she hadn't heard from her best friend in a week, that the last time she'd seen her, Emily had been scared of her husband, that something felt very wrong. When officers arrived at the apartment, they had to force entry. The smell of decomposition hit them immediately. They found Emily's body in the bathtub, decomposing in the summer heat, covered in stab wounds. They found Brandon in the living room, sitting calmly on the couch, Emily's phone in his hand, mid-scroll through her Instagram feed. When they asked him what happened, he didn't deny it, didn't try to run, just said she'd betrayed him, that she'd humiliated him, that she'd destroyed their marriage and his reputation, that he'd had no choice. He was arrested on the spot, charged with second-degree murder, taken into custody without bail. The investigation revealed everything quickly: the Onlyfans account, the discovery, the arguments, the searches on Brandon's phone, how to delete Onlyfans accounts, how to track someone's online activity, how to cover up a crime scene. Prosecutors called it a clear case of domestic violence escalating to murder. Jealousy and control taken to their deadly conclusion. Brandon's defense attorney tried to argue temporary insanity, claimed that discovering his wife's Onlyfans had triggered a mental breakdown, that he'd lost touch with reality in that moment, that it was a crime of passion, not premeditation, but the evidence said otherwise: the week-long cover-up, the impersonation, the calculated way he'd cleaned the scene. This wasn't a snap decision. This was murder. The trial lasted just over 3 months. Emily's family and friends testified. They talked about who Emily really was: a talented artist, a loyal friend, a woman who was trying to survive in a difficult financial situation, a woman who deserved better than what Brandon gave her. Brandon's family tried to defend him, said he'd never been violent before, that this was completely out of character, that he'd loved Emily deeply. But love doesn't look like 22 stab wounds. Love doesn't look like hiding a body and pretending nothing happened. Love doesn't look like murder. The prosecution played recordings from Emily's phone, arguments they'd had in the weeks before her death. Brandon's voice, dripping with contempt. "You're disgusting. You've embarrassed me. I can't even look at you." They showed text messages he'd sent to his brother, talking about how humiliated he felt, how he couldn't trust Emily anymore, how he felt like every man in Portland had seen his wife naked. The jury deliberated for 8 hours, found Brandon Hayes guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to 30 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. Emily's mother gave a victim impact statement that brought the entire courtroom to tears, her voice shaking as she spoke. "My daughter was trying to help. She was trying to keep their life together. She made a choice that she thought would save them financially, and he killed her for it." She looked directly at Brandon. "You didn't love her. You wanted to own her. And when you realized you couldn't control every part of her life, you took that life away." Brandon didn't respond, didn't show emotion, just sat there staring straight ahead, like he still couldn't comprehend what he'd done, like he still believed somewhere deep down that he was justified, that Emily had brought this on herself, that he was the real victim. But here's the part that makes this whole tragedy even more devastating. Emily had already deleted her Onlyfans account 3 weeks before Brandon killed her. She'd stopped posting, stopped engaging with subscribers, stopped everything. She'd made enough money to help with their immediate bills, and she was ready to move on, to focus on her tattoo work, to try to save her marriage. Brandon never knew, never asked, never gave her the chance to tell him. He'd already decided she was guilty, already decided she deserved punishment, already decided her life was worth less than his pride. The irony is crushing. She'd already stopped, but he killed her anyway, because it was never really about the Onlyfans. It was about control, about ownership, about his inability to accept that Emily was her own person with her own choices. He couldn't handle that. So he took everything from her. Her life, her future, her dreams, her voice. In prison, Brandon wrote letters to the judge, to Emily's family, to journalists covering the case, always insisting he was a victim too, that Emily had betrayed him, that society had failed men like him who were just trying to maintain traditional values in a modern world. He blamed Onlyfans, blamed social media, blamed the culture that made it acceptable for women to monetize their bodies. But he never blamed himself, never took full responsibility, never showed genuine remorse for what he'd done. Emily's friends and family started a foundation in her name, the Emily Rodriguez Fund, supporting women experiencing domestic violence, providing resources, safe houses, legal aid, educational programs about the warning signs of abusive relationships. They wanted her death to mean something, to save other women from men like Brandon, men who think love means ownership, who think jealousy justifies violence. The case sparked national conversations about Onlyfans and sex work, about toxic masculinity and male entitlement, about what happens when shame and pride collide with violence. Some people blamed Emily, said she shouldn't have done Onlyfans if she was married, that she'd provoked Brandon, that she'd brought this tragedy on herself. Others defended her fiercely, said she had every right to make money however she chose, that Brandon was a controlling, abusive murderer who would have found a reason to hurt her eventually. Because that's what abusers do. They find excuses, they justify their violence, they twist the narrative to make themselves the victims. But at the end of the day, Emily Rodriguez was a 26-year-old woman trying to survive, trying to help her family financially, trying to live her life. And Brandon Hayes was a man who couldn't handle not being in complete control, who saw his wife as property, who chose violence over communication, who chose murder over acceptance. 2 people, 1 marriage, 1 secret, and 1 irreversible decision. Emily is gone. Brandon will spend the next 3 decades behind bars, and everyone who knew them is left asking the same questions. Could this have been prevented? If Emily had told Brandon from the start, would it have made a difference, or would his reaction have been violent either way? If Brandon had gone to therapy, dealt with his jealousy and control issues, could they have worked through it? If someone had intervened earlier, recognized the warning signs, could Emily still be alive? We'll never know. All we know is that she's gone, and he took her. Not because he loved her too much, but because he never really loved her at all. Real love doesn't destroy. Real love doesn't control. Real love doesn't kill. What Brandon felt wasn't love. It was possession, obsession. And when he lost that sense of ownership, he made sure no one else could have her either. So now I want to ask you something. Think about this case. Think about Emily's choices and the situation she found herself in. Do you think she was wrong to keep the Onlyfans secret from Brandon? Or did she have every right to make money however she needed to without his permission? And what about Brandon? Do you think this was truly a crime of passion, a momentary loss of control? Or was this premeditated murder by a controlling, abusive man who'd been planning this for weeks? How does this story make you feel? Does it make you angry, heartbroken, frustrated with how this could have been prevented? And here's the harder question. If you were in Emily's position, struggling to pay bills, would you have made the same choice? Would you have started an Onlyfans to help your family, knowing the potential consequences, knowing the judgment, or would you have found another way? And if you were in Brandon's position, discovering your partner had been hiding something like this, how would you have reacted? Would you have been able to talk it through? To work past the feelings of betrayal? Or would jealousy have consumed you too? I'm not saying what Brandon did was justified. It absolutely wasn't. It was murder. Cold-blooded murder. But I want you to think about the emotions at play here. The shame, the humiliation, the feeling of betrayal, because these emotions, when left unchecked, when combined with a need for control, can turn deadly, and they do, every single day in relationships across this country. This case isn't just about OnlyFans or social media. It's about power dynamics, about the ways men and women navigate relationships, about expectations and boundaries, about the secrets we keep and the lies we tell to protect those we love. It's about what happens when pride collides with violence, when shame turns into rage, when obsessive love becomes murder. Emily Rodriguez's death was absolutely preventable. If Brandon had valued her life more than his ego, if he'd seen her as a complete human being rather than property, if he'd been able to communicate his feelings instead of letting them fester into homicidal rage. But he didn't. And now Emily is gone, and Brandon is in prison. 2 lives completely destroyed, one by death, one by his own violent actions. In the end, it wasn't OnlyFans that killed Emily Rodriguez. It was everything Brandon couldn't accept, everything he refused to communicate, everything he couldn't control. Emily wanted financial stability and independence. Brandon wanted complete control over every aspect of her life. She made a choice to help their household. He made sure she'd never make another choice again. So tell me what you think. Was Brandon's sentence enough? 30 years for brutally murdering his wife? For stabbing her 22 times? For the week-long cover-up where he pretended she was still alive? Or should he have gotten life without parole? And do you think tragedies like this will continue happening as long as platforms like OnlyFans exist, as long as there's money to be made and jealous partners who can't handle it? Comment below and tell me how this story makes you feel. Tell me if you think there were warning signs Emily's friends should have acted on. Tell me if you think Brandon could have been stopped before it got to this point. Tell me what you would have done differently if you were Emily's friend or NCE. And Emily Rodriguez's life mattered. She deserved so much better than what she got. She deserved a partner who respected her autonomy, who loved her for who she was, not who he wanted her to be. She deserved to live, to raise a family, to continue creating art, to grow old. But that was all stolen from her by the person who promised to love and protect her. Remember, Emily, remember what happened. Remember that this could happen to anyone. And if you're in a relationship where someone is controlling you, monitoring your every move, making you feel like you have to hide parts of yourself just to keep the peace, please understand that this is not normal. This is not love. This is dangerous, and it can end exactly like this. With you gone and them in prison, nobody wins, everyone loses. And if you thought this case was disturbing, wait until you hear about a woman who faked cancer for years to get donations online. That story will blow your mind. Subscribe now so you don't miss it, because reality is always stranger and more shocking than anything we could make up.